What is the difference between shame and guilt? Great question. My name is Carolyn Cowan. I am unafraid to answer the bigger questions about shame. I am a psychotherapist, I'm a trauma therapist, I'm fascinated by shame. We are here talking about shame. A lot of people ask me about the difference between shame and guilt. So guilt is a sense of failure in action. A failure in an action that you could, should, ought have taken, or a failure in an action that you did take that you shouldn't have taken. So guilt is, I didn't send a birthday card. Guilt is, of course, I ate too much chocolate, I ate chips, I ate butter, whatever, you know, all that stuff. That's guilt. But the interesting thing is, so guilt is an action. Guilt is I broke something. Guilt is I didn't send a birthday card. Guilt is I had an affair. Please don't assign all of these things to me. Sometimes I do send birthday cards and no, I haven't had an affair. But guilt is all about an action that you did or didn't do. So it's external. It's how you're moving through the world. And guilt is, in essence, the Catholics take responsibility for guilt. A lot of people talk about Catholic guilt. And in essence, you confess your guilt if you are Catholic, and then you're given Hail Marys or repentance of some sort. You say sorry and you're free. And obviously, if you didn't send a birthday card, you can easily say to somebody, look, I'm really sorry. And if you did eat chocolate, I'm sure you'll be fine. I'm sure you'll be fine. But there's a much deeper thing here, and that is shame and guilt often go together. But before we go into shame and guilt together, so understand that guilt is external to you. Guilt is an action that you did or didn't take. It's something you did or didn't do. You feel guilty because you binge watched something. You feel guilty that you spent 4 hours on your phone. You can also feel shame about all of that. But shame is really different. Shame is a really, really different emotion. And it's quite interesting. I've written a book about shame, 85,000 words about shame. I can't tell you how many times I used the word shame. Is there another word for shame? No, there isn't. Is there another feeling like shame? No, there isn't. It's a really fascinating and very misunderstood emotion. And it's an emotion that has consequences. So the actual sensation of shame is an internal feeling of, and they can be any of these words. I'm giving you words. They're not necessarily how I feel if I hit shame. They're the possibilities. I work with shame all the time. So if somebody is shamed, they can basically go into a feeling within themselves that could be they're bad, they're toxic, they're unlovable, they're unwanted, they're broken, they're contagious, they're contaminated, they are unforgiven, they are abandoned, they are unwanted. There's so many words that shame has, and in a way everybody has a different version of it in terms of how you interpret it. But also shame is a really interesting thing, because shame essentially comes from experiences of abuse and trauma that were not properly dealt with at the time that they were experienced. So in another video, I'll talk about the 9 types of abuse, and in a separate video, I'll talk about the 3 routes to trauma. But shame is where you, in essence, in the most simplistic descriptor, you have a crack in your sense of self. There's a deep crack in your psyche. It's called a core wounding, an inner child wounding, a narcissistic wounding. Now, that's a word that's very misused by social media. A narcissistic wounding means you have a wounding to your sense of self. Your ego is your narcissism. And so different theories call it different things. Inner child wound, core wounding, narcissistic wound, primal wound is another. So if you have had experiences in your childhood that were traumatic, abusive, and weren't dealt with at the time appropriately, then it's highly likely that you will have shame. Some people don't have shame. Some people Some people are literally shameless, but some people don't attach to what happened, or they just put it away and decide never to deal with it. It doesn't actually mean that it's not rumbling away, but it isn't affecting their daily life, perhaps until something else happens. Now, I've mentioned getting shame when you're young, but actually the truth is, you can have events when you're older that could lead to an enormous amount of shame, and they include things like date rape. They include things like if you did something to somebody else that hurt them or harmed them and you hadn't foreseen the consequences and you didn't mean to. They include kind of social, religious and emotional constructs that we have as a society, where perhaps if you lost a child or you gave birth, had a neonatal loss or gave birth to a stillborn child, you can have an enormous amount of shame. And that's really sad. And it's not sad in why on earth would you have that, but it's a horrible form of shame. In that way, I'm talking about sadness. You can have shame because you're impotent. You can have shame because you're infertile. You can have shame because you're not rich. You can have shame about lots of things. So shame is quite an interesting thing, because shame is this inherent within you sense of failure, lack, not necessarily impotence that's only rooted in sexuality. It's a sense that you're not worthy. Shame is a sense of being unworthy. It's about being somehow broken. And so this is a really important thing to remember. So you have an internal sense of failure, lack, invalidity, not wanted, not worthy, contaminated in some way. So that's shame. And then coming back to guilt. Guilt is actions that you take. You feel bad that you said that. You feel bad that you shouted at your kids. But quite often, so let's use the example of shouting at your kids, that's where guilt and shame come together. And interestingly, guilt and shame come together a lot with food, a lot. I mean, the food stuff, the body stuff, nobody is talking properly or well about body shame, about guilt, how guilt triggers shame, how also, it's a huge thing. I mean, I can talk for days about this subject, because shame is a really big subject. If you can fundamentally understand that guilt is an external action, shame is a sense of yourself that you're flawed, you're broken, you're a failure, you're useless, you're unwanted. Shame is interesting because shame, it creates its own identity, and therefore you move through the world as damaged goods. Now, the truth is, you can have shame because of an action that you did. So there, you could have guilt about an action, but you can also have huge shame about an action. I mean, awful, let's name it. You might have assaulted somebody, you might have sexually abused somebody, you might have hurt somebody, as I said earlier. You might have stolen stuff, and you can feel really, really uncomfortable in yourself. And the issue with shame is that shame has rules, and that is, if you have shame, you will shame. There is another video about that. If you have shame, you will shame, which means you will pass shame on. And if you have shame, you're available to be shamed. So I mentioned a crack in the psyche. Once you have shame, and if it's not dealt with, worked on, you will act in, you will harm yourself, not just physically, you will harm yourself with your words, with your thought processes about yourself. You will turn on yourself, and you might be one of those people that wakes up in the night and lies in bed going, oh God, why did I do that? Oh my God, why can't I get thin? Why did I do that? What am I doing? Questioning. Quite often we shame ourselves. Another time that a lot of people shame themselves is if they're ill. And you might be one of those people. It's a very strange thing. Again, it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about. But, if you suddenly find, I've got a cold, what did I do? Oh my God, I've got to get rid of it. I have done something. I am a failure. How did I get this? What did I do? How did I make it better? And the illness creates the shame. The eating of chocolate, I mentioned eating chocolate cake. This creates terrible anxiety in the self, not only because of the guilt, but because of the shame. And then that anxiety wants to be soothed. So guess what? You might act out. You might eat more because you can't bear how you feel. You might cut yourself. You might vomit. You might purge. You can do all sorts of things. because shame is linked to disorders. All of the disorders are rooted in shame. I'm actually going to end this video here because that's a really contentious sentence. I would like you to think about, what are your questions about shame? Send me your questions, and I hope I've helped you to understand the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is an external action. Shame is an internal sense of being broken or flawed or cracked or somehow unworthy. Go forth, beautiful people. Remember to stretch. It really helps.